So let's get started.
Okay.
We'll edit all that out, hopefully. So today's guest is Ann House, and we are going to be talking about health and horses. So in my attempt to talk about basically health, nutrition, fitness, getting out in the nature, doing things in middle age, and reinventing yourself in middle age, I thought you'd be the perfect guest. So in recent years, you've gotten super into horses, so that's where we're going to start. So we want to start with the very beginning. What are your very first memories of horses?
I don't really know what my first memory is. I feel like they were always there for me. Probably my first memory of horses in general was reading childhood books about horses. Looking at picture books when I was little. I had all the, storybooks about horses and even like anatomy of horses when I was little. And as I got to grade school, it was more like Misty of Chincoteague and Stormy, Misty's Foal, those books by Marguerite Henry that a lot of little girls read. Um, so that's the first thing I think that I sort of enacted on, you know, um, putting horses into my daily life because I didn't have a horse and so I couldn't do it otherwise.
How about like movies or TV shows? Were you drawn to those?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, all the all the westerns, I watched all of those as early as my mom would let me, as far as like Gunsmoke and The Big Valley. I loved that. I loved Little House on the Prairie, all those kinds of things. Black Beauty. Anytime horses were on TV, I was watching, if I was allowed to watch TV at that point. Um, and then we had friends who had farms and we would ride out there as a family. Um,
How old
and
were you when you started doing that?
I don't know. I would have to ask my mom. Young, because it was a big deal when we were allowed to go out on our own, without a parent, you know,
Mhm.
um, which was still young. It was grade school. Um, but I couldn't give you an exact age because I don't remember. Um, but I also was going to summer camp in Tennessee, and they had a pretty nice horse program there as well.
And then, did anybody in your family have horses? Like, you ever remember like sitting back and listening to stories about
Well, my
horses?
dad, my dad had a horse,
Uh-huh.
um, but he basically just jumped on the horse and rode him. The horse lived next door to him, and he didn't talk about him too much. I think it wasn't like, wow, your dad has a horse. It was just kind of one of those things back then. I think some people had motorcycles, some people had a horse, some people had a bike. So
So when you rode horses with friends, it was you were little and like probably being led by a rope, or were you ultimately like kind of a wild child and just hopping on horses?
I don't think we were ever led by ropes. We probably should have been at some point, which you would not call a rope, you would call a lead. But no, it was a different time back then. We sort of were like, this is how you go right. This is how you go left. Stop and have fun, you know? Not unlike how you got your first boat. So, you know,
So did you ever have any like injuries or get thrown from the horse, pop back up, that kind of stuff like
as a
when
little
you were
girl,
little? Yeah.
no, no, not at all. And I had no fear of horses. I didn't actually know anyone that had had an injury that they were at least speaking about. I'm sure our friends that had farms had been thrown. I mean, because it's just part of having horses. But they didn't talk about it. And, so no, I was really just oblivious to anything besides just the beauty of being on the back of a horse in nature and going wherever you wanted to go, and just having it be such an incredible experience.
So in Maryland, and since you're from Texas, I'm asking if this is different. So in
Mhm.
Maryland, kids mostly, well, pretty much the only ones I knew were girls who had horses. They competed, they rode, they jumped, they took
Mhm.
lessons,
Yeah.
almost more like organized, like a little league sport.
Yes.
Was that something in Texas, or was Texas more like, I know this person has a ranch, we're gonna go hop on a horse and go cross the stream, and you're like in the middle of Lonesome Dove?
Yes. That was more what I was familiar with. I'm sure people did do what you're speaking of, which is more of a dressage type of writing, English writing that's popular up here, still is. But I didn't know anyone that did that. When I got to college and they had a pretty big writing program there, that's the first time I met people who were like doing 1,000 sit-ups every day to do a high enough jump on their horse, that type of thing. The kind of writing that I grew up with was hop on a Western saddle and just get at it. It wasn't, I mean, I'm sure people had lessons for sure. If you had your own horse, I'm sure you had a lesson. But since I didn't have my own horse, and the lesson facilities weren't super close by. My parents were not super eager to do that. Um, we just hopped on and hightailed it out.
Did you know anybody in high school who was playing like linebacker, free safety on Friday night and trying to be a rodeo cowboy on the weekend?
I
And if you
didn't
didn't,
know.
can we pretend you did? Like the
I know that would
legend is
be
better
much
than the
cooler,
truth.
right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. No, unfortunately, I didn't. And even though I think that there are a lot of boys and men who, I mean, there's one where I board my horse now who's an amazing rider, Olympic level rider. It is dominated. The leisure riders are dominated by women, I think.
And then, so uh, I don't even think we mentioned, since anybody who's going to watch this knows who we are, but maybe someday somebody will watch who doesn't know who we are. We've been married 31 years and we met in college. So when I
Yeah.
came in the picture, you were going to school in Virginia. I was going to school in Virginia. Um, and I remember your senior year, you were doing horseback lessons. Did you ever do it before you met me at
Um,
college?
oh yeah,
Okay.
I took horseback riding the entire time I was in college, and it was funny because it was the first time that I realized, um, for better or worse, that I was unusual in some ways because I didn't have a healthy fear of horses. And so the instructor there, there was a lot of privately owned horses at my college, and then there was a few that they used for lessons. And one was a particularly ornery horse who didn't really want to be used for lessons, and he gave me a run for my money. And she put me on him because she knew that it wouldn't deter me from taking lessons. I never fell off of him, but he tried his best to get me off.
And then did you feel like you became, because you were taking lessons, did you feel like you became a better rider than when you were just doing crazy stuff as a kid?
No, not in college. I think for me, there's only so much you can do in an arena on a horse that's not yours. And where I went to school, they didn't have, it was all arena work because it was mostly dressage riders and who are, doing arena type activities, whether it's jumping or, freestyle or whatever. And so that No, the answer to your question is no, because I was not interested in that type of writing. So I didn't really get, I got more exposure and more time in the saddle always makes you a better rider. But
So, not a trick question because I probably know the answer, but so you were very brave around horses. Is that out of characteristic for you? Like, are you the kid who's going down the big hill with no hands on the handlebar? Are you the kid who's
absolutely
like doing
not.
the big jump on the
No,
ski slopes?
no.
Okay, so it was uncharacteristic for you to be super brave in that
Yes,
in that realm of like
yes.
activity.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
And why is that? Is that because of your love for horses, or is that like something happened when you were little, you saw Black Beauty and were like, oh, I'm safe?
No, it was just an instinct that I had that there was no reason to be scared. I think also I hadn't been around, like I said earlier, I hadn't been around anyone who'd had a really terrible accident. Um, and my desire to be around and with horses trumped anything else. And you know, I just felt like it was where I belonged.
Okay, so then fast forward. So you finish college, you're super into horses, and then 25 years goes by, even more maybe. Yeah, 25 years about, where you did a couple nose to tail rides in Wyoming.
Yeah.
Um, so was there any thought like, oh, I gave up something, or was it you were so busy with kids that you didn't even
Yeah.
notice?
Well, I wouldn't say I didn't notice, but I mean, that was a really, really, really busy time in my life. And it was a wonderful time in my life, but it was a time for something different, you know? And horses do require a lot of time. And I mean, to have the relationship that I would want to have. And there was just absolutely no time for that. I mean, I was a stay-at-home mom with four children, and to be the kind of mom I wanted to be, it needed to happen full time.
Did you ever think about trying to get like particularly your daughters into horse riding, or was there somebody in your life who was kind of dragging them off to lacrosse practice so the competition was too much?
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't express, my kids are funny. I have always loved animals, any kind of animal, and have always had a cat or a dog or, something. And the kids didn't really seem to have that basic desire for having that contact with animals. We always had a dog, almost always since we've been married. Very few years that we didn't. So I think that they were satisfied with that. They never asked about it. I would show horses to them. They didn't have any, and I think you have to have that, just like any other activity. You have to have it come from within. And
So
it's super expensive for kids. So
we did a couple rides as a family, and number two daughter would always stay behind because she got thrown from a horse when she was
yes,
little, on like
yes,
a pony ride kind of
that's
thing.
correct. Yeah.
Um,
That I had nothing to do with, by the way.
yeah, but we would always go ride, and I particularly remember one time like getting up kind of into the mountains, and I guess there must have been too many riders or something, but you were definitely taking the lead, like telling your kids what to do, and the cowboy right in front of me starts inviting you to come live with them, all the cowboys in Idaho, and help lead trail rides. Did you
I think
consider it?
think he sensed a similar spirit, you
Uh,
know. And there is something special, and I don't know, maybe you experience it in one of your hobbies, that you've had lifelong, but you do meet a kindred spirit, and there is something, a connection there. I mean, I didn't have a connection with this cowboy, obviously, and I think he was joking, but
But was there like when you're on, so like when I'm on the ride, I'm just like, okay, I'm riding. And looking at the scenery. Were you, did dreams ever come into your head? Like, oh, I would like to do this again someday. Or was it just like you're trying to just get your kids through a ride?
I probably a little bit of both. I mean, wasn't trying to get my kids to ride because, and nose to tail, sorry, nose to tail horses they're just trained to do that. I mean, it's literally like getting on a train. I mean, they're and most likely not going to do anything, besides eat grass, which was what the issue was with that trail ride. But I enjoy just being in the presence of horses. So I did enjoy it from that standpoint. If I didn't have Cash, who is my horse now, I would want to do that just to put my hands on a horse,
Uh-huh.
you know. But I don't think you get a lot of horseback riding experience from those things. It's more like a way to see a view, you
Okay.
know.
So
Um,
fast forward, kids are grown. I think you were somebody who some people, because you were so dedicated to your kids, were particularly your mom would say it was worried about you being an empty nester, right?
yeah. Hmm.
So you kind of transitioned into horses. How did that happen? Was it slow? Was it luck? Was it just popped into your head, or was this something like when your youngest Roddy was a freshman in high school, you were kind of like looking at it for 4 years, kind of thing?
Hmm.
You remember?
I think the transition to empty nesting for me was pretty tough. And it probably started when Roddy, when our youngest was a junior in high school. Before that, we still had enough activity at home. When he was a freshman, Mary Kay was a senior. We still had a lot of stuff, going on. And so when I really started to think about it, I'm sure it was you who just said, what's the next chapter going to be? And I started thinking, with my free time, what, what have I been missing? You know, and how could I make this fulfilling in a different way? And that was the easy answer for me. So I just started Googling. Um, we live in a very horse rich state, you know, as far as just the accessibility is amazing. But I was really determined to ride Western because that's where my comfort zone was. That was home to me. And I think it still is. That's where I feel really, really comfortable and makes me feel like I'm back, in my younger days. And I did ride Western for 2 or 3 years, and then basically decided that I think I've gone off on a tangent,
No,
but
no, you're
before you
good. You're good.
okay.
Yeah, keep going.
Um, and then I kind of decided that I was fighting. There was so much more in to offer me here if I didn't just ride Western.
Okay.
So,
So, I remember, and we'll get to your one horseback riding trip that I remember that you took with your sister, and you were kind of doing a lot of riding to get ready for that trip. And I
mhm.
think that's when you kind of first showed that you wanted to not just ride horses, but become a better rider of horses.
Yeah.
So you're basically trying to become a good rider in your 50s, and that's when you started kind of doing some training. I remember something like with some kind of maybe it was ankle flexibility, something. But there was
Oh,
definitely flexibility stuff and strength stuff that you wanted to work on to be a good rider. So you were kind of like started doing some physical fitness training for riding.
yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So what was that all about? How did you realize that you needed to do that?
Well, so my sister and I had, when the kids were in school, we were sort of my sister lives in Colorado, I live in Maryland. But we were both playing some tennis, which I really enjoyed. And so we were taking tennis trips. And so then we decided to do something different, decided to go, she loves horses also. And so we decided to do a horseback riding trip in New Mexico. And New Mexico is a special spot for us because we vacationed there as children and also had some pretty fun horse experiences there as kids. So anyway, yeah, you really have to carry yourself. It's not fair for the horse to carry you. You need to have really good body mechanics and you need to be strong and have a strong core. And so we've been to this place twice, and the first time that we went, the rides are up to 5 hours, and one time we got lost, and it was more like 7 hours. I mean, and your body's beat at that point, unless you're doing that every day, you know? So you really do need to be strong. You need to be able to, your body needs to be able to withstand carrying itself in that way for that many hours. So yeah, you gotta walk. Yoga's really great. A lot of core.
So you've kind of always worked out. You've run marathons.
Hmm.
You did train, weight training. You did bar for a while. You
Hmm.
did CrossFit. You kind of did everything.
Yeah.
And so growing up, uh, and I talked to Emma on her podcast a lot about this, like the idea of like working out to look good, or as you get older, working out to be healthy. How is it different when you're working out because you want to perform in something you love? Like, is that seems to be a much healthier way to work out, but also a lot easier to find motivation because like you have a trip coming up and you're like, I want to ride well on these days. So you're working out for that purpose. Do you notice a huge difference or is it still the same?
Well, I do notice a difference because you're not going to progress in your writing if you don't keep your physical fitness up. It won't happen. So, and I did run marathons. I have done all those things. I lacked the desire to stick with them. Something would happen and then I would switch to something else. I just was not jumping really, but 2 years here, 2 years here, 2 years here. Those things were much easier and much more accessible when I had young kids, and they definitely served a purpose for me, for sure. Um, but I think as I get older, it fulfills two things for me. It's a great physical exercise that I watched a video the other day of a 90-year-old woman riding, and she doesn't look like upright and stuff, but she's doing it. I mean, that's awesome. And and it also fulfills a huge spiritual um uh you know place for me. It's outdoors, you're in nature. And so that's a motivating factor as well because it's working on your body and your soul, your mind, at the same time.
So, so the whole purpose of some of my podcasts is orthopedic wellness and health. So now we're getting into the nitty gritty. You're on a trip in New Mexico. Part of the group goes one way, and you were a little bit more experienced rider, so you went another way.
Mhm.
What happened?
Well, number one, overconfidence, right?
Uh,
It goes back to when I was a little girl and I just never had any fear. Um, I probably should not have gone with that group because I was more experienced than the other group. So I didn't want to go with that group. But the other group had a lot more writing experience than I did at that point. Anyway, um, I went where we were just going to go taking off in an Aurora, and my horse was very strong, and I started, and I was in a saddle that I it was in anyway, a saddle that was put me in a different position than I was really used to, which is not making any excuses. I just flew off the front of the horse, landed next to some big boulders. Actually, was very, very lucky because I was not wearing the protection I should have been wearing and all that kind of stuff. Um, Fell on my hip, got a nice concussion, black and blue, but I didn't break any bones. It was scary and a good kind of wake up call to, you can't just go do whatever you want all the time. You need to, you
so So, a couple things. So you called me. I was in the middle of a trivia contest with probably like 20 teams. My team was Dr. Klepper, Dr. O'Donovan, our
need,
nurse practitioner, Laura O'Donovan, and our friend Mark Grandy. And we crushed it. We won. Dr. Klepper and myself carried the team.
of course.
Laura O'Donovan had the big win though with a question that was out of our generation. And then I get a call. You're crying. You've fallen. Don't know if stuff's broken or not. There was a role, you had no medicine, so there's a role of whiskey. So I want to hear more about the role of whiskey in healing, but
Yeah,
mostly about the how you came home and you had the deepest, purplest bruise. I mean, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I see bruises all the time.
yeah.
You used arnica
Yes,
on your bruises and it cleared faster. This is anecdotal evidence. We don't have any
yeah,
statistics, but
yeah,
it was
absolutely.
crazy
It was amazing.
how
Yes.
your leg from your hip down to your knee was like purple, like the Ravens'
Yeah.
purple uniforms.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it cleared in like 2 days.
Days. Yeah, it was
It was
amazing.
insane.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I didn't call you until we were sure that I didn't need to go to the emergency room. And so what happened was I fell. I knew I couldn't, I would not be able to. Well, I did actually. I got back on. They helped me get on from, a really high level, so I wouldn't really have to move my leg too much. And I got on and rode just to the parking lot where I could get off, lay down, put the saddle under my head, and basically everybody looked for some Tylenol.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I had to lay in the parking lot for about 45 minutes while they hightailed it back to get cars, trailers, blah, blah, blah. And my sister really wanted me to go to the emergency room, and I was just like, I think it's okay, blah, blah. So an hour ride back to the ranch, and I call you and I'm like, I don't think anything's broken. It hurts really, really badly, but I can put weight on it. Um, and I wasn't even aware. Remember, I did something to my shoulder, but we didn't even realize that until a couple months later. You remember?
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, a woman there was on our trip, and she was 81, and she had really bad arthritis in her hands. And the only way she could hold reins for 5 hours a day was every morning she put arnica on her hands, this one particular brand that I think is really amazing. And she gave it to me, and I just started bathing my leg in it, basically, my hip. I mean, because it was all the way behind, my back was bruised everywhere. Um, and so by the next day, my day one after the fall, 24 hours later, I mean, it was just a horror zone. And we were going to Florida for Thanksgiving, if you remember, and you were like, well, I don't know what you're going to do because you're going to look a mess. And by the time, a week later, by the time we were in Florida, I was completely fine. You couldn't even tell. It was incredible. The arnica really, really helped, not only with the bruising, I think the swelling, the inflammation, everything. But I was so diligent about putting it on. And this woman swore by it. She swore by, and you could, I mean, she was amazing. We had no idea she was 81 when we were
So,
riding.
so you're recovering from your injury. You still want to ride. Is there any fear with riding? How quickly did you get, well, you got right back on the horse to get back to the parking lot. But after that, when you got
Yeah.
home, what was your riding experience? And
Hmm.
you now switch from kind of getting in shape for riding to kind of like a rehab, like a
Yeah.
physical therapy to get back on the horse.
Hmm.
Or,
Yeah, a little bit for that one. I mean, I feel like that was, since I didn't really have any breaking bones or anything like that. I mean, it was definitely a mental hit, but it wasn't my horse. I realized I should not have been doing what I was doing, right? I had no business being, anyway, yeah, that was, the whole situation was just a kind of a perfect storm, right?
yeah.
Oh, and I didn't tell you, yeah, instead of Advil, we just drank a bottle of whiskey that night, and I felt much better the next day, actually. But
My first podcast was on living sober, so
I
you were not
don't,
living sober.
I don't
That would not
recommend it.
approve.
Yeah, I don't recommend it, but in this situation, it worked.
Okay.
But I was really, really stiff. And I was taking lessons 2 or 3 times a week at that point, around the corner from our house. And I just got back on and just went really slowly. Being in the saddle actually helped to loosen up my hips and stuff like that. So it wasn't, that accident was not mentally or really physically that hard to get over. I did have some lingering shoulder issues, but you know, I was very
So,
lucky.
so as we move on,
Hmm.
our daughter Emma gets married.
Yeah.
I think it
Hmm.
was like one of the highlights. It was such an amazing day.
It
Everything went
was.
perfect. We wake
She
up
had
the
asked
next
me not to
day.
ride beforehand.
Say it again.
Remember that? She had asked me not to ride horses she said, please don't ride for the month before.
Because she was worried you would scrape your face or
She
something like
was
that.
worried, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I would have a scab somewhere.
So the wedding occurs, incredible day. Everybody wakes up the next day in a great mood from having a great day. Uh, you go to ride horses, and I am out in the woods with the dogs,
Yeah.
really far out in the woods, and I get another call
Hmm.
that you've fallen and you're being taken to the hospital in an ambulance. So what
Yes.
happened that time?
So, so this was, um, maybe a year later. I
I
can't
think
remember.
about a year. Yeah.
About a year later. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this was another one of your wife not using her best judgment. Um, I still did not have my own horse, but I was riding at a place where I rode two horses all the time and knew them very well and, stuff. But I was wanting to broaden my experience, and there was a woman there at the place where I rode who had a horse who was a really nice, well, a, I don't know how to describe it, but anyway, she was having issues with her horse. She was scared of her own horse. And I had ridden this horse two or three times before. Sometimes it was great, sometimes it was challenging, but I was learning a lot. And that's really where I wanted to be. And she was really wanting me to ride it because the horse needed someone to ride it. So, I got the horse all tacked up. I walked into the arena to mount up, and we were all going to go on a trail ride. There was two other people there, and the horse did not want me to get on it. She was kept walking away from the mounting block, and I was just like, "Hey, nope, we're doing it today." So I got on. The minute I sat down, she started bucking, and she just bucked and bucked and bucked. And on the fourth buck, I went over her shoulders, and landed really on my tailbone, broke my sacrum. And I it's all really blurry. Um, but I remember I was trying to, she was running around. So I basically just army crawled my way to the side of the arena so that I wouldn't get stepped on. And the woman who was in the arena with me, came over, called for the barn owner. They called the ambulance, and, you met me in the ER.
So I met you, you're strapped down like you would see somebody in an NFL game who's taken off the field with a neck injury. You're
Yeah.
strapped down, you have the collar on,
Yeah.
and it ended up that you broke your pelvis. So you broke your sacrum and your pelvis. So a totally different, not just the arnica kind of bruising, a much
Yeah.
longer rehab. And it
Yeah.
was the beginning of summer. So it
That was
interferes
huge.
with
Yeah.
all the activities you were planning, plus social life, plus probably kids being home.
Yeah.
So a very different, you're rehabbing your body, but then you love horses, so you have to rehab your mind.
Yeah.
Did you think about quitting? And then how did you and how are you overcoming your fear?
Yeah. Yeah. I did not think about quitting, except that, um, you didn't ask me to, but you asked me to seriously consider what I was doing.
I did?
You did.
That doesn't sound like me.
Well, you were scared, I think. I
Okay,
think it
okay,
scared you.
okay.
So I definitely, the physical stuff was tough, but it wasn't scary. It was just going to take time. We knew I was going to get better. I had a really good concussion on that one, with turned into some pretty strong vertigo, that I actually healed with acupuncture. It still comes back every once in a while, and I'll go to a couple sessions of acupuncture and it goes away. But that was the only thing I could do to finally get rid of the vertigo, which lasted much longer past my pelvis healing. Um, but I never thought about stop riding horses. I thought about being smarter about riding horses, and I think I am smarter with riding. Well, now I have my own horse, so that happened in June the 10th, and August the 13th of that same summer, I got Johnny Cash.
Okay.
Um, and so he has helped me. Riding my horse that I trust and know has helped me a lot. It's been much more of a mental battle than a physical one. Because at this point, I have a sore hip every once in a while and stuff like which is why I am currently doing a lot of yoga. um, as a rehab and also a just preparing for all the things that I still want to do. But um, uh, the mental part of it is the thing that most riders struggle with because you're going back on doing the exact same things that you did to get really hurt.
So your horse is named Johnny Cash and your dog is named Daisy Duke. Is there a
Yes.
thing going on here?
Yeah. And the other one's Jesse James.
Yeah.
They're just fun, cute names. And I have to give a shout out to my sister who started it with the Jimmy Dean. And
Okay.
yeah, it just makes people smile when you tell them. And Johnny Cash is a black horse, and
Uh-huh.
it makes
He
sense.
was the
But
man in black. Yeah.
the Man in Black.
So, with Cash, is it that you guys are familiar with each other, or does Cash have a certain maturity,
Hmm.
personality, dependability? Like, is
Well,
there
yes.
something there?
Well, the reason why I got him was that the guy I bought him from said, "This is your bomb-proof safe." I mean, bomb-proof is a word that a lot of horsemen should. You should run the other way if someone says a horse is bomb-proof because they're not. But you know, steady, safe, just wants to walk around, on the trail, and that's really why I got him. And it just happened that we needed each other, and we have a really, really strong bond. And I made a promise to myself that once I got my own horse, I wasn't going to go out and ride strange horses because there's no reason to. I mean, there's a big school of thought that you get better the more horses you sit on, but I'm 56. So I feel like that the risk outweighs the benefit for me and what I want to do. So,
So as you get older, how do you think about risk? Like whether it's anything like maybe some of these injuries if they happened to you when you were 12, you would just bounced and been fine.
yeah,
As you get older, you're more there's more risk, and as you get even older, like even just walking when there's a little snow on the ground could be risky. Like how do you assess risk for doing something you love? Like what's your risk reward ratio?
yeah. Well, I think I mean, it's like anything that we do as older adults, right? I mean, whether it's you snow skiing or, m- people do road biking, the one thing is that with those types of activities, you're mostly in control, whereas I'm in control of my horse, but he's 1,000-pound animal with a brain of his own, right? So there is an inherent risk in that no matter what. So you have to always respect that. And I think that's what I've learned is although I feel a strong bond to horses in general, what I'm learning now is that there still needs to be a healthy respect for the autonomy of the horse, right? And so the risk benefit for me is, I mean, I could obviously still get hurt on Cash any day of the week, but we know each other, and I feel like we have the relationship we have is I can sort of read him, and I'm not going to ask him to do something that he's clearly not suited for, or I'm not feeling that he's right that day. And I also protect myself a lot better. Now I wear a helmet every time I ride. I didn't used to do that. I have protection that I can wear, but I think for me, the what I have learned through horses because of, their empathy and their mirror neurons that they have and all those kinds of things and being in nature and just the respect for the, you know, outside and farming and land and all the things that we do when we're on a horse, um, outside of arena work, uh, has made an incredible change in my life. And that's to me, mental health wise, far outweighs anything else.
So what is the like say a little bit more about just being out in nature. It seems to me like when you're out in nature, you're being physically active, but mentally you're being active. You have perfect purpose. Being around animals seems like it would reduce stress, you know. Um, is that something you knew getting into it, or something that you can look back on and be like,
Yeah.
wow.
I don't think I really thought about it getting into it. All I was thinking about was I want to ride horses. And that's definitely been a huge benefit. And I think that there's a big school of people who are into it for that reason. And then there's a camp that is completely oblivious to it because that's not something they're interested in. And, that's fine. For me, it's very grounding and it helps me to work on myself in that way because I think when I'm with Cash, I feel, um, I have a bigger awareness of where I am emotionally, where my vagus nerve is on that day, what the reading is, as far as like, I'm super nervous today. Today I'm feeling very calm. What can I do to change those situations? It's gotten a lot more intuitive in that way, but also just becoming a lot more present in your own body, which was something that I didn't do. I mean, regardless of being on a horse or not being on a horse in my life as a younger person.
And I'm thinking about this just because right before we did this, I just had is it Wagyu steak,
Yeah.
uh, which literally, I mean, I'm already a really good chef, but I just cooked it a
Okay.
minute and a half on one side, a minute and a half on the other side with butter and salt, and it was the best steak I've ever had, like better than Ruth Chris or any of those places.
Yeah.
So it made me think I got that steak from something you met through the barn, right? So, since I talk a lot about nutrition, how does being outside, being around farms and ranches,
Mhm.
any thoughts on how that affects your nutrition, and also any thoughts about how nutrition affects your performance as a rider?
Okay. Yeah, well, yes, the steak that you ate was a friend of mine who I met through horses, but we don't really ride together. They have a cattle ranch out on the Eastern Shore, and that was amazing. But yeah, I think,
Are you gonna back me up that I'm an amazing chef, or are you gonna?
I'm going to let that slide probably. You
Okay.
might be an amazing chef if you tried more.
Okay.
So how about
Okay.
that? But yeah, I think that there's a lot of, I mean, do you remember all the peppers I was bringing home,
Yeah.
this summer and stuff? It's, it's lovely to be with people who are growing their own food you benefit from, there is a lot to be said for just working the benefit you get from working the land. I mean, there's a reason why people garden, and it's not just because they want to have a beautiful garden. It's because putting your hands in the soil is a very calming experience for most people, you know, and, and the accessibility there, it's just it's a chain effect. You meet one person that leads you to meeting someone else and someone else and someone else, and, yeah, it's fun to see all the animals, and we see all wild turkeys, foxes, deer, all the things that you see, and we see a lot of deer blinds, a lot of that stuff too. Um,
It kind
but
of seems like a natural, like you're out with horses, you're out with wild animals, you're in farmland. There's always going to be a farmer's market, you
oh, the
know,
farmers markets are amazing out
baking your
there.
own stuff. You're
Yeah,
around wildlife. You have a different appreciation for wildlife. So you kind of understand the hunting lifestyle of eating and appreciating
yes,
what you
yeah,
hunted, all those things. It just seems
right.
to all go together. It's almost like it's a natural correlation to kind of be a healthy, like primal eater if you're living an outside lifestyle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I think, the expression becoming one with nature is kind of overdone, but you do feel that a little bit in that you want to just eat the things that are grown by your friend or, nurtured by your friend or yourself if you can possibly do that. We unfortunately can't grow anything here because we live in a forest, as you can see from behind you. We don't get enough sun to grow anything besides more leaves. But but yeah, I mean, eating clean for sure, and any type of activity that you do, uh, from horseback riding to roller skating, walking, you need to fuel your body with the right things, and it makes a huge. I mean, you should see what the amount of supplements we give our horses, to keep them in condition and things like that. It's we should all be, doing those kinds of.
How do horses get that big eating grass and hay, and then they don't have body fat, right? That's just like muscle. Like
Well,
they're
some horses have body fat for sure, because the horses can get overweight, and a lot do. They have a lot of issues, especially particular breeds with overweight and getting some serious health issues from it. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And then what about your experience with as you're going through all your rehab and training? What about horses? Like horses are pretty delicate, right? Musculoskeletal wise, not just breaking their leg in races, but actually just aches and pains.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's been my experience, and I'm certainly not the foremost expert on it, but yeah, I mean, there's a big business of horse nutritionists and horse, biomechanics and
Chiropractors.
chiropractors, body workers, cranial sacral people, Reiki people. Horses are living the life. Well, some of them are.
Yeah. So then, you're middle age. You're kind of well, we're past middle age.
Yeah, we are.
But you're this is an example. You're somebody of an example of somebody who kind of recreated yourself in middle age.
Mhm,
So also you're making a whole new group of friends,
mhm.
or connecting with
Yeah,
people you've known for a long time on a different level or about a different hobby.
sure.
How's that been?
It's been great, especially for me, who I've always been a very introverted person, and can be shy. It's it's a commonality that evens the playing field, and probably not the best way to say it, but you always have something to talk about, right?
Yeah.
So for somebody who is maybe feels a little more awkward in social situations, it's a very easy thing to walk into, you know,
Mhm.
for me. And I've also met people who've done things that I consider super interesting, and have interesting stories to tell. It's opened up a lot as far as um, people who are doing life differently and living on farms and living, that's how I found out about all these, as the kids say, all the woo woo stuff that we're doing now is through horses.
Okay. So just touch briefly on woo-woo
I
stuff. What
don't
do you
know.
mean
I
by
don't
that?
know how much you want me to say about that. So,
Just trying to connect with your horse, right?
yeah,
That's all. Yeah, that's
yeah,
enough.
yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Hmm.
So back to the kids. So, and you have four kids. You can't really judge Ryan because he's been away in law school and now he's clerking for a judge. He just got married last weekend and is doing great, but he's kind of been too busy to be around the horses.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, and he probably would be interested. I mean, he'd probably hop on a horse. Just seems like he tends to
Yes.
be happy to try new
He's
stuff.
always said that. Yeah.
Yeah. But he's been busy, so he hasn't had the opportunity. What about the other three kids? Is there anyone who is either more drawn to the horse or just wants to spend time with her mom?
Right. Not naming names or anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, well, yeah. I mean, Mary Kate. Unfortunately, I think she would love, to do it, but because she had that experience as a kid, it just really changed her availability to be open to it, and that's fine. She's got
Uh,
plenty of other things.
yeah.
Emma has no interest in it at all, which is fine. And
What if
Roddy
she was allowed to talk the whole time?
I know. And if she knew her horse was listening to her the whole
Yes.
Roddy does. Roddy's been out with me. Roddy's ridden Cash, and he's also ridden a friend of mine's, her Clydesdale. Oh no, he's an Irish. Well, anyway, very, very large horse. Roddy's a tall guy, and so
And he's
he
pretty
needs,
big.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so he
Not big
really
in a bad way if Roddy's listening. Just
he's
he's not.
muscular.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so he has and he's a beginner rider. So
Mhm.
my friend has a Irish draft that she popped on and he did a great job. He's been on a couple trail rides on him and he can ride Cash again, if he wants to. He has so much limited time, but I feel like he's the one who would really love to do it. If he had more free time
And he
because he's
likes
in college,
hunting
so
and
he's
being
not here to.
outside and
Yeah, just being
hiking.
outside.
Yeah.
There's so many fun things you can do that he enjoys doing, like shooting and all that kind of stuff on your horse and all that kind of jazz. But he's got to learn how to ride first.
Okay. Uh, so wrapping it up, anything else? I mean, that ties into health, wellness, you know, uh, kind of finding purpose in middle age, all those
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's really important if you have a big change like I did, um, to either continue what you love and maybe find a different way to make it your own, or to find what you do love and get a really good sense of purpose and a sense of self and just some autonomy in your life from it, because I think as moms we've been so attached to the identity of everyone else in our home, and this is something that I do, and it's for me, and I think that's really important.
Can you hear the dogs going crazy?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So,
My dog is in here. I don't know where your dog is.
uh, well, I have a dog keeper who's not doing her job.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, that was
Ryan, if
awesome.
you're listening, your dog's doing fine.
Yeah. Yeah. That was awesome.
Okay.
All right. See ya.
Thank you.
Love
Bye.
you.
Love you.